Allahu, 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 Allah, Allahu, 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 Allah.
Have become, for one reason or the other, a source of bitter contention amongst Muslims. One such topic is today's topic, which has been billed as should we follow madhabs, madhahib, or should we follow the Quran and the Sunnah? And in a lot of people's minds, not just young people, but primarily young people, it is seen exactly like that. It's this or that. And in many people's minds, it has become an issue. So much so that you can actually find many Muslims who won't go to certain mosques because, oh, they're on that side of the fence in this question. And vice versa. Some people not going to the other type of mosques because they're on the opposite side of the fence. And one brother I was just talking to just before the prayer, and I said to him that actually this issue is something very personal to me, because in around about 1984, in a mosque not far from here, but in this area, I along with another particular brother, started spreading up and down the universities in the 80s and the 90s, up and down from the universities in Scotland to wherever we were invited. I was very clear that, we shouldn't follow madhabs, schools of law. Quran and Sunnah is enough. And my local imam of the mosque, who I used to, up until that time, have a very good relationship with, one day he saw me praying slightly different than how I was taught to pray when I grew up in the mosque and at madrasa, in the religious school. And he, after the Dhuhr prayer, he called me over, and in fact actually it ended up being half the committee of that mosque, which is a bit embarrassing because my father was on the committee as well. Then they were saying, what are you doing? And I said, well look, here are the hadiths. And by that time, somewhere around about the early 80s, there was at that time it seems like a wonderful English translation of Sahih al-Bukhari in 9 odd volumes. But actually by the time I started learning classical Arabic, I realized how fractured and bad that translation was. But nevertheless, there were 9 volumes of Sahih al-Bukhari. And we had heard as we were growing up, from a young age, the Imam on Friday will say, Rawahu Bukhari, Rawahu al-Bukhari, Rawahu Muslim, Rawahu Tirmidhi. And then later on, as you get older, you're beginning to say, Tirmidhi is a hadith collection, Bukhari is the most famous hadith collection, Muslim is the next one that follows up. And then all of a sudden, I'm 17 or 18 or thereabouts. And someone says, we should be following Quran and Hadith. Isn't that what the Prophet left us? I don't know. Well, didn't the Prophet say? Yeah. Did he leave us madhabs? I don't know. Well, do we find him leaving us madhabs? No, not really. Was Abu Bakr a Hanafi? Was Umar a Shafi? Was Uthman a Maliki? Was Ali a Hanbali? Radiallahu anhum ajma'in? This is me. I don't know. I don't think so. Although, truth be told, I got confused with Hanafi and being Hanif. Because I remember that, Ibrahim alayhi salam was Hanif. So I thought, well, if he was a Hanif and, everyone's following his way, then, maybe Abu Bakr was Hanafi. But anyway, that problem got sorted. And I said, no, so it sounded really well. And I was taken in with that really simple, powerful argument. There was no agenda. I wasn't getting paid by anyone. Okay? There was no political idea. It was just, barring a few semblances of Jamaat Tabligh Jamaat, normally up north, and certainly not in the universities, by and large, most people of my generation, second generation, that is the first lot of people to be born and raised here, parents coming over in the late 50s or 60s or whatever, most of us were happily drifting through the booming 80s. It was the yuppie years, where my grant for university was just over £3,500. per year. Okay, 3.5, mashallah, and you don't drink or smoke, right? SubhanAllah. And at the end of that, I bought this big, at the end of term 1, I bought a big hi-fi system. That's how much money I saved. I mean, it was booming. So, and you just went with the flow. So this issue, which I'm going to start formally soon, is very personal to me because around about by 1991, from 1980, let's say from 1986 to 1991, I was really hot on one side of the fence. My only saving grace, bi'idhnillah, is I never made it an issue to divide over the Muslims. So I'd still go to whatever mosques, even if they agreed or disagreed with me. But in my heart, they were wrong. And there's been a corruption of Islam, but we're now returning to the pure, authentic Islam. So when I discuss these things, and I normally don't say this, but when I discuss these things, I would like you to just have this little confidence that I'm someone who not only knows both sides of the argument well, but once upon a time, for the first 6 or 7 years of my conscious, serious religious life, not just because I'm, alhamdulillah, I'm born a Muslim, okay, but I'm talking about a serious religious life, I was really hot on this. So much so that myself and the brothers that I worked with, and one of them was my senior as well, and my mentor, we would actually call down scholars from Jordan, if possible scholars from Yemen, but normally they were from Jordan or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who were on this thing, okay, and we would learn from them. And so some of the original early books of this kind of thought or fiqh, which comes under the name of Ad-Dawat al-Salafiyya, or being Salafi, myself, we're looking at someone who was instrumental in translating some of those books from Arabic to English and or getting them printed. Again, no petrodollar money. No petrodollar money was being offered to a lot of mosques, a lot of organizations. And I'm not saying it's haram, people took it. But we had this principle from day one, this group of brothers that I was with from 1986. We don't want to be tied to any person. We just want what we understand of pure Islam. And if you take money, even if it's halal, you're going to get yourself tied. Because money is going to be given to you, and then it's going to be expected that you may have to say certain things or not say certain things. And we didn't want to be like that, because we saw our elder generation, some of whom were tied, and we didn't like this. Because you're talking about 18, 19-year-old youths with that vigor, with that vibrancy, with that energy to change. Forget about hikmah and ilm, wisdom and knowledge. That's obviously missing. But the atifah, the passion, the emotion, the sense of justice, the sense of, so much so that when the Russians were in Afghanistan, so this is not Muslims fighting Muslims, this is not when Taliban were around and then they're fighting Muslims, that's a civil war. I'm talking about when the Russians were in Afghanistan, groups of those same individual brothers made their way over to Afghanistan to fight the Russians because of a sense of injustice and a sense, but we knew there is a jihad there and it involves weapons, and then there is a jihad here which involves tongue and pen, and it was always clear to us. And the mashayikh and the scholars who we had clung to, in particular Sheikh Ibn Baz, the former mufti of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Al-Albani, the former well-known hadith scholar, who we clung to at that time, they reminded us, one type of jihad there, one type of jihad in the non-Muslim lands, and when you're at home, another type of jihad in serving your parents. We were really clear. But I'm just showing you the energies that we had, and we wouldn't take money. Okay, even though people around us, organizations, were telling us it's halal, we say, fine, we're clear, it's halal, we're not making up our own fatwas. But we've seen what happens when you take money. Then you have to say something or you can't say something. And I'll give you a good example. When the Iranian Revolution happened, 1979, for many of us it was an Islamic revolution because we don't know Sunni, Shia, we just think, okay, the big state in America, some Muslim country is going against it, therefore it's an Islamic group. But Shia revolution, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, its scholars, Egypt included, and many other countries, but I'm going to focus more on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, only because all the other Sunni Muslim countries even though they were against this Shia uprising, they didn't have the money to globally finance anything. But the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia did, because money was coming in the trillions because of the recent oil. It wasn't discovered, they discovered it in 1936 or whatever, but by the time you're pumping it, by the time it's coming into the national treasury, and then you have the budget of spending, this was millions and millions and trillions of dollars. So Saudi Arabia, there were two things going on, very broadly. This is not an in-depth political analysis. There was a political thing whereby Iran wanted to flex its muscles and make Shia Islam the dominant Islam worldwide, and the amount of dawah that was going on here, converts were being given a lot of money by the Shia embassy, and literature, free literature, and many of my, especially my Afro-Caribbean friends, black friends, okay, who some of them who had become Muslim, just became Muslims, Shia Islam. Soon we found that it was being countered by just as much money from the local Saudi embassy and books from Saudi Arabia against Iran and whatever. And it was the first time we realized from the books of the Shias that what have the classical scholars been saying. And therefore it equipped us to talk, sometimes argue, one or two times unfortunately fight, in trying to clarify the truth. But then what happens is, I remember going back to one particular organisation that got a lot of these books in the centre of London, and we would just get there and then they were free. So one day I went there with my friend, and we're young, still 18, 19 or whatever, managed to get a car, got to that place and said, could we have some boxes of books? Oh no, no more books there. I said, mashallah, all gone. Because they were like stacked up to the ceiling. He said, then my friend is walking around just down the corridor. He says, oh, Mr. Such and Such, the books are here. Maybe you didn't know. Because, no, I know they're here, but I can't give them to you. Oh, why? Do you want us to give you money? We'll give you money. No, we can't have these anti-Shia literature out. Why? Because. Why? Because. And he was clear. Then the boss came down and he just basically showed us the door and said, out that way. But before that, they were giving it to us, we were reading it, we were going around the country, trying to combat what we believe the Quran and Sunnah is the truth, and Shiaism, even though they're generally Muslim, but they have certain, the classical books of Shiaism have certain beliefs, and certain of the contemporary Shia scholars have certain beliefs that are just unacceptable. And as a whole, Shiaism is a bid'ah within Islam. And it's firqa dhallah. Then we came back to this area, East London somewhere, and we were a bit upset. Why did they treat us like that? And then one of the people who used to work in that centre, but he works in a local mosque, said, I don't know if you know, but the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia had just re-established diplomatic ties with Iran. And we said, yeah, we heard that on the 10 o'clock news a couple of days ago. But what has that got to do with anything? And so this elderly sheikh is saying, they've established diplomatic ties. You're talking to 20-year-olds, right? And this elderly 50, 55-year-old person, they've established diplomatic ties with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iran, diplomatic ties, embassies, whatever. And when, yeah, so he was trying to say that the official body, which is a mouthpiece of the government, can no longer afford, or can, politically, to be openly against the Shia ideology in Iran. But for us is why, but there are still Muslims in this country who are being confused. How does that stop? And that was one of my first, it was a first learning lesson in how politics could sometimes trump religion. And of course, as you grow and read and you become a talib al-ilm and you study with the mashayikh, and some of the books of tariq, history are open to you as well, and you learn that's not an uncommon thing. Anyway, point being is, so that was one thing going on. But the mashayikh in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, many of them weren't attached to the politics. For them is, we would phone them and say, Ya Sheikh, and some of them out of their own money would say, oh, give us your address and we'll have they would say our postal service isn't very good, so you might get it, or you might, and they would send us little packages with books that they photocopied from their own library or whatever, so that we could have material. Point being is, I was very much involved in that. So the question is something that I'm very aware of, and unfortunately I have a hand in it for joy and for woe. Okay, and the question is simply this. Are we meant to just be following the Quran and the Hadith, the Quran and the Sunnah? Or this kind of thing called madhabs, Hanif, and the madhabs that we have now today, and they have been around for the last 1,000 years. The ones that we know now, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. Should we be following one of those schools or madhabs? Or is it just enough of Quran and Sunnah? So with that introduction, lengthy introduction being said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh, wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina, wa min sayyi'ati a'malina, man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu, wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu amma ba'd. Okay, I normally tackle this discussion in a one-day seminar, and almost since 1992, I've been doing one-day seminars about this, so whole 8-9 hours, and then normally, this was the 2005 notes, but normally the people who attend the seminar get notes. Obviously I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to try to keep it simple, and we can continue the discussion in other sittings as well. On the one hand, there is no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ says in the authentic hadith, تَرَكْتُ فِيكُمْ أَمْرَيْنِ لَنْ تَضِلُّوا مَا تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّةِ رَسُولِهِ or sunnati. The Prophet said, I'm leaving amongst you two things. As long as you cling tightly to them, you'll never go astray. The book of Allah and my sunnah. So he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tells us that two things, if you cling to, then the firmer you cling to it, and the sincerer you cling to it, the less likely you are to go astray, to be misguided, to fall into significant errors. Sins will be there as everyone will sin at some level, but we're talking about no type of deviation in belief or innovation in religious practice will be there, as long as the tighter we cling to it and the more sincere we cling to it. The Prophet said that. So he, having said that, surely that should be the end of the discussion. Because whatever else we don't know about Islam, all of us Muslims are clear that La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam translates in practice to, it may be La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah, okay, it may be that none has a right to be worshipped except Allah, there is no God but Allah. But in practice, it's Allah should be worshipped according to the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Practically, that's what it comes down to. And Muhammadur Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasallam comes down to that practical thing. The Prophet's word trumps all other words. Even if our parents say something clearly against a prophetic teaching, a clear prophetic teaching, let's say. Our parents say to their son, "Oh son, I love you to wear some gold ring on your wedding day." But the prophetic teaching is absolutely clear and categorical that gold is forbidden for men to wear. Then the words of the Prophet trump and take priority over the words of parents, even though we're meant to obey and serve our parents, but with a caveat, as long as they don't tell us to disobey Allah and the Prophet. All Muslims have that idea in mind. They may not be able to express it like I've just done, they may not be able to flesh it out with proofs, but generally that idea is there. Well, since the Prophet said, I'm leaving you two things, and he didn't say, and we're quite sure that he didn't say, I'm leaving you four madhabs that you are going to have to follow. So surely that should be the end of discussion. For many people, it is the end of discussion. For them, that's it, clear. And therefore, what most of the Muslims have been doing since the last 1,000 years, let's say from the year 400 onwards, and most scholars, for that matter, they've missed the mark. Or, if you're brave enough, they're misguided. Their Islam is dodgy. And, alhamdulillah, Allah's put me here to return people to the pure truth. That's how some people have. And it's arrogance, but for a lot of people, they see it as simple as that. Because the Prophet did say, I'm leaving you 2 things. And he didn't say, I'm leaving you 3 things, or leaving you 4 things. And he certainly didn't say, I'm leaving you madhabs. And yet, here is another historic fact. By the time of the 4th Islamic century, roughly, you may say the 5th Islamic century, but really, by the 4th or 5th Islamic century, most scholars and most lay people, Amatun Nas, were following a madhab, a school of law. So let me just clarify what I mean by madhab. Madhab, okay, sometimes we call it school of thought. I don't find that to be a particularly good translation. It's a school of law because a thought may think about ideas and philosophies and theology and aqidah, and madhabs aren't really, the 4 madhabs that I described aren't schools of thought and afkar and fikr, and they're schools of law, of fiqh, of halal, haram, of lawful and prohibited. That's really what they concern themselves. So schools of law is how I'll translate it. And school of law is simply this, that, and this is a historical fact, so this is not an opinion, this is a historical fact. And you can read, obviously in Arabic, but there is a decent translation of these 2 books in English, and they're being translated in Urdu as well, even before English. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah in the 7th century wrote a very nice small booklet called Rafr al-Ma'alam and Al-A'immat al-A'lam, and it's lifting the blame from the noble, rightly guided scholars. And it's a small booklet, and his point was to show that how why would a scholar give a ruling, a fatwa, and it goes against an authentic hadith? Because the reality is that has happened, but why does it happen? Well, Ibn Taymiyyah has a nice discussion, beautiful discussion, but the sum and substance of it is, however it happened, it was not intentionally done. No rightly guided scholar that we consider to be rightly guided in our religious tradition said, oh, here is the hadith of Prophet, very clear, but I think I'll do a fatwa oppositely. If you and I did that, we will be called sinful. If an imam did that, he couldn't be called an imam. He could be called a fasiq, a sinner, a renegade. He couldn't be called an imam. But the fact that he's an imam and his reputation shows that he is a lover of the sunnah, okay, tells you that if he did it for a reason that he would be excused for. Okay, and I won't go into that. If it comes up as a question, we can. The other historic narrative, which is more familiar to some of the brothers and elders and sisters from the subcontinent, or who have some origins in the subcontinent, Shah Waliullah, Muhaddith Dahlawi rahmatullah alayh, he wrote an astounding piece called Hujjatullah al-Baligha. And in the Hujjatullah, he has a most beautiful discussion of the history of madhabs and schools, starting from the Prophet's time up until the 4th century, through the times of Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik, and then Shafi, and then Imam Ahmad, and the scholars of Hadith who came half a generation after him, until that codification time. And he also has a book called Al-Insaf fi Bayan Sabab al-Ikhtilaf, which is a really small booklet, which, again, if someone could read just that booklet, it really will sort out this issue of why madhabs evolved. Point being is they evolved, and all it is, a madhab was, for example, we have Ibn Abbas in Makkah. When the Prophet passes away and most of the Sahaba pass away, Ibn Abbas, 70, 80-year-old, he is the unparalleled alim, mufti of Makkah. There's just no one as more knowledgeable than him in deen. And in Medina, let's say Ibn Umar, who roughly was the same age, very young when the Prophet was around, when he passed away. But now, 10, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, they are the remnants of the Sahaba, and people are sitting around them, around Ibn Umar in Medina, and asking him some religious questions that are either in the Quran, or the Prophet said, but the Quran says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلُ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So whether it's in the Quran, but I don't know, because I haven't memorized the Quran, maybe I don't read the Quran regularly, let's learn it's in the hadith. How am I supposed to know all the hadith? They're not in one book form. So I ask a sheikh, and Ibn Umar, for example, and he'll give me an answer. He'll say, oh, in the Quran it says this, or in the hadith it said that. Or I could ask him a question for which there is no direct answer in the Quran or the hadith. It's a new occurrence. Just like when many Muslims came here from their Muslim countries for the first time in Britain, there were things that were happening in Britain and situations that Muslims got themselves into that they would never get themselves into in Muslim lands. So we needed newer type of fatwas. So that was happening because Islam was developing and growing. Thousands and millions of people were becoming Muslim. And Islam was growing into different lands with different situations and different problems and issues. So people like Ibn Umar, radiallahu anhu, in Medina, and Ibn Abbas in Makkah, they were centers around people, around which people would ask fatwas. Some of their fatwas started being collected and written down. And some of their methods of how to come to an answer, a legal answer, because these were jurists, scholars of law, like we have lawyers here today. They have a process of how to derive the law. So by the time they passed away, some of their senior students then became centers of learning. But they adopted, they followed their way, the method of their teacher. So Ibn Abbas's students would follow Ibn Abbas's way and would also give fatwa with Ibn Abbas's rulings. Same thing with Ibn Umar. And their little circle in the masjid becomes much bigger. And the fatwas that are being written down or memorized are becoming more and more. By the time, that was Makkah and Medina, but if you add in the time of Umar, Kufa, Iraq, okay? Kufa and Basra, Makkah, Medina, Basra and Kufa, the two in present-day Saudi Arabia, and the last two in present-day Iraq. Those were the greatest centers of learning. Really, those were the four, there were places in Khurasan, but these were the four places, really. Ali radiallahu anhu and Ibn Mas'ud and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, they make their way to Iraq. And Iraq begins to develop its fiqh and its fatwas and whatever. Makkah and Medina begin to develop their own. Out of Iraq, 80 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, 80 years after Hijrah, so really 70 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Abu Hanifa is born. Leaving his history, by the time he is a mature man, he gets into learning with the scholars of his time. Scholars who have sat with scholars who have studied with Ibn Mas'ud, or Ali, or radiallahu anhu, and have learned. So he then takes knowledge and learning from those who have taken directly from Ali and Ibn Mas'ud, or from those who have taken knowledge from those who have taken from Ibn Mas'ud. Imam Malik in Medina, a few decades later, does the same. Medina is the home of the Sahaba, but whatever, so it's full of Sahaba anyway. And likewise Makkah. What Abu Hanifa does specifically, rahimahullah ta'ala, is that Allah gives him tawfiq and that ingenuity to say, you know what, now we've got all these fatwas of all of these Sahabas and these hadiths of the Prophet and these rulings, and Kufa, the markets of Kufa were very sophisticated. The markets of Medina weren't so sophisticated. Because Kufa was Iraq. Iraq was already a big civilization before Islam came on the scene. Thousands of years before Islam came on the scene. So they already have sophisticated rules of buying and selling. But what about, how many of those rules of buying and selling agree with Islamic Sharia? How many of them don't? How many of them? So they had to be sifted. Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, what he does, he does one thing which is, I mean, he does many things, but one thing that is just absolutely, we're indebted to him. He then starts saying, okay, let's take fiqh from A to Z. The issues of what makes water pure or impure, or when does water become pure or impure, and the issues of salat, because pure and impure water depends upon, wudu will depend upon that, tahara. And salah, and zakat, and Sawm, and hajj, and then you have the buying and selling, and the marriage and divorce, you have inheritance, you have all of these things, how to make qada, judgmentship, leasing lands, and renting, All these normal things that human beings do, that the Quran and Sunnah has something to say about directly or indirectly. And the Sahaba had fatwas and the Prophet had hadiths. He begins to codify them, write them down in a manual. It wasn't ever done like that before. Writing down fatwas was done, but he actually decided, let's put it in a systemized order. And then we can teach it. And it'll be clearer. You're starting with this. He did that, and everybody else followed that pattern. It's unchanged even today. It doesn't matter if it's Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, it's just the way. And even most hadith books that have chapter headings, like Bukhari and Muslim, have followed that way. Roughly followed that way. Okay? Codification makes it easy now, because I have, let's just say I have this 2,000 page manual, and you ask me, or let's say I don't have a very good memory, I haven't memorized it all. Okay, you ask me about issue of zakat. Okay, so zakat, yes, and then because of this hadith, yes. And I can give you fatwa just like that. I mean, that's assuming that I've learned that manual from the teachers. Very soon, what happens is, and you have lots of these imams, not just 4. You have lots of these imams. In early Islam, you have maybe 20 imams like this. They're all brilliant imams. But what happens is, some of these imams don't have students to carry on their teachings. So, out of these 20 imams, 10 don't have students. So really, their fatwas don't survive more than a generation. Okay? What did Imam al-Awza'i say? I don't know, but al-Awza'i was the Imam of Iraq before Abu Hanifa was. But he didn't have many students. We don't know much of what he said. So, boom. And then out of these 10 left that had many students, let's just say 5 of them didn't codify all of their writings properly. So it was there and there and there, and which makes it a bit difficult. Because now I have to go there. Where will I find a fatwa on zakat in this school, amongst this imam's fatwas? It could be there, it could be there. But when it's in a codified, systemized in a book, it becomes easy. So practically, for no reason, for no clear reason, we ended up only having 4 madhabs. It's not because there only can be 4, it just 4 survived and were fully codified, and had their rules of making law, of making fiqh. That's the only reason why we had 4. If we lived 900 years ago, we could have had 5. Ibn Hazm's Zahiri school was also a proper legitimate school, but that died down. So for the last 900 years, we've only had 4. That's it, that's the reason. And then the issue becomes, well, see, there was a book, when I first came here in this masjid. It was an Arabic book printed by Dar es-Salaam, and all they did was they collected 6 of the main hadith books, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasai. And I think it could have had the Muwatta of Imam Malik as well. And it's, the writing is that small, but it had, about 20, 30, 40, 50,000 hadiths in that volume. Okay, so the book is like that long, that thick. Okay, I have a copy at home, but I didn't want to bring it because I thought it was here, because it's really heavy, and I walk from Legend Station. And all I was going to do, as I normally do in my courses where I bring that book, I say, okay, look, for those of you who feel that Quran and Hadith is enough, well, here is the Quran, right? And here are at least 60,000 or 50,000 hadiths from the well-known hadith collections that even lay people are aware of, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud. So, for example, with the Quran and all of these hadiths at your fingertip, if I said to you that the Imam is praying 4 rakah for Isha, and on the first at-tahiyyat, the first tashahhud, okay, so he's prayed 2 rakahs, recited loudly in them, and he's gone down into ruku and sajda. Now after the second sajda, the Imam should do what? He should sit. But instead the Imam forgetfully stands up. So he didn't do at-tahiyyat when he should have. And he stood up, and he's fully standing now. Some people in the crowd might have said subhanallah and tried to get his, but he's up now. And he's, okay. the Imam hopefully will know what to do, during or at the end of the prayer. But just with the Quran and Hadith at my disposal, what should the Imam do? Could I work it out from the Quran itself, the 6,500 ayats in the Quran? Does any one of them clearly tell me what the Imam should do? Where will I start looking in the Hadiths? And is there a Hadith that tells me what to do specifically? If the Imam is in Isha prayer and he misses the first tahiyat in Isha prayer, he should do A, B, C? Even if there was, do you think it's easy for the lay person to know where to look and how to find it? Do you think every lay person, every non-scholar is required, obligated to have this big collection of hadiths at home and they have to work it out themselves? Because we have to follow Quran and Hadith. That is true, we have to follow Quran and Hadith, but there are ways of doing it. Do you think that every Muslim has to go and look for the Hadith? Because there are some people who say, a Muslim must know the evidence for everything he does. Or to use the Arabic phrase that they use, the Muslim must know the daleel for everything. If he doesn't know the daleel, the evidence, he can't act on it. Allah bless me that. This was one of the things that made me turn in 1991. I was just sitting in the masjid, and I realized, because I was much older than many of the brothers who were on this same dawah with me, mashallah, many of them were so sincere and they sacrificed so much. But what I was noticing, because I was kind of older and I had read more and my Arabic was coming along a bit better than most of theirs, because they were like 5-10 years younger than me. What I was finding is, because I was on this thing, you have to know the evidence, you have to know the evidence. What I was finding is that most people, they just can't remember evidences. What they can remember is the end answer. So we would go, myself and my elder Muslim brother who brought me into this way, we would go to, say, a house. We'd go to your house, and you're the elder, and then your children are on. We're trying to bring them into the deen and practicing on the dawah. And we would say, look, see, the reason why they do this in prayer is because there is a hadith in Sahih ibn Khuzaymah from such and such a companion that says this, and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said about the hadith, boom, 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 So throwing all these great scholarly names, and the parents are like, they're not used to this. And even the young brother who is on this path that have to follow evidence, when he goes and tells his friend, the reason why you should pray like this and not like that is because Abu Aaliyah said so. Or Brother Manawar, Abu Muntasir said so. He took the names of, and one day, I heard that. I thought, that's really odd, isn't it? I've now noticed for the first time in my life that even though I have an idea why I pray this way, why I do this, why I do that, most people, by the time you explain, even the ones who think they need an evidence, must have an evidence, a dalil, they can't remember the dalils. What they remember is the one who they trust told them this. The one who they trust tells them this. Then one day we were travelling to Birmingham for a talk, and I said to my best friend Abu Muntasir, I said, don't you think that's odd? We've got the people with good intention away from blindly following the four Imams, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, all their schools, because we want to bring them to Quran and Hadith. But actually now, they are not saying at home, oh, the reason why I pray like this because Abu Hanifa or the Hanafis or the Imam Malik and the Malikis or Shafi and the Shafi. Those names have been replaced by who? Abu Muntasir and Abu Aaliyah. Not because they were trying to make us imams, they were doing this natural thing that comes natural to any human being, which is unless you are a really seasoned scholar or some kind of academic, you tend to just want the end answer and you relate it back to an authority. Ebola is a problem, because I heard it on BBC One. Then someone says BBC One is a load of lies. Okay, then I heard it on RT, Russian TV or Russian Times, whatever. All right, or my friend is a specialist in germs and bacteria, and he told me Ebola. So you don't go out and check yourself. You just rely on authority. Sometimes the one I trust is not the one you trust. Sometimes the one I trust is the same as the one you trust. Same thing with religious knowledge. Unless you're a scholar, a specialist, if you're not a specialist, you're going to trust. So that time I thought, this is a real strange thing, because two things are happening. One, no one is really following evidences. And then it popped into my head. Of course, from Allah. And I asked myself this question. What is the dalil to say that you have to follow the dalil? What is the evidence from Quran and Hadith that says you need an evidence from the Quran and Hadith to follow it? And I realized that there isn't anything. The Quran says, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. It doesn't say ask for an evidence. It just says ask the people of knowledge. All you have to do is do your best to ascertain who is a person of knowledge. So you can't just go down Walthamstow Market and ask any Lalu Panju. You have to ask someone who you believe is an alim. You might get it wrong. He might not have turned out to be an alim, but you've done your best. Then inshallah Allah will look favourably upon you. But you just can't be bothered, and you flipped a coin and said, all right, I just asked this person a religious question. Even if he gets it right, you're still going to be sinful for not obeying the command of Allah. Ask the people of knowledge. The Ahlul Dhikr, and in this case, Ahlul Ilm. So, that's all Allah says. Allah doesn't say ask for a proof. And anyway, in most history of human beings, until the modern era, most people couldn't read or write anyway. And even if they could read and write, who had hadith books in their house? Printing became a global phenomenon in the 16th century in Europe, and much later in the Muslim world. Otherwise people are writing out hadith books by hand. Why would you as a layperson go and buy a hadith book from the places where they sell in Baghdad or Damascus or wherever? You wouldn't. You're just working in the field as a farmer. What are you going to buy a hadith book for? What are you going to waste that time and money? So how are you getting evidences? Yes, now we get to the modern internet age and modern printing age. That's a bit different now. I can buy any hadith book, sometimes which were not even available to scholars, I can have on my bookshelf. Okay. So we are not required to ask for evidences. If we know an evidence, that's helpful, but if we don't, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. As long as we've asked a qualified scholar. Schools, okay. All it is about madhabs is this. Our scholars really differ, truly differ. Let me just read an example. Imam An-Nawawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, one of the agreed upon scholars of this ummah, he simply says, that there are two opinions on whether a layman, a non-scholar, non-qualified scholar, has to follow one of these four schools, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. He said there are two opinions. Opinion one is that since they have now been fully codified, and that's happened for the last 900 years, since they are now fully codified and fully worked out in their details, and there are scholars to revise and upgrade rulings that need to be upgraded, since all that is done, a layperson must follow one of those schools in order to keep his deen safe. If he doesn't, how will he know what to do in the case of, for example, missing out the tashahhud, the at-tahiyyat in the first sitting? He won't know. How will he know what are the conditions, the shurut of salah? It's very difficult to just work them out from reading a Quran or reading some hadith book. And how many hadith books are you going to read as a layperson? Assuming you can read. And we're talking about classical Arabic, not Amiyya, okay? Not slang Arabic, let alone English or Urdu or Swahili or whatever. Classical Fusha Arabic. Most Arab speakers today don't speak Fusha. They don't, and most Arabs today find it difficult to understand Fusha, classical Arabic, as we find it difficult to understand Shakespearean English. But the difference between Shakespeare and us is only 400 years. The difference between Arabs and classical Arabic is 1400 years. We understand little bits if someone read us Shakespeare, we'd get a word here, a sentence there, an idea here, but there'll be some things that will we don't use language like that anymore. Quran is Shakespearean in Arabic. Okay? If you're brought up in a good family, you might Arabize, you might understand a bit more. If some of the areas, like for example, a lot of the Damascans, a lot of the Syrians, they try to, I'm not saying this generally, a lot of the Syrians will tend towards Fusha even in their daily thing, and a lot of the Egyptians, I mean, you can't get more slang than Egyptian, alright? Amiya is like, you know, Misri equals Ami, right? Sah, ya Sheikh? Subhanallah. So we're talking about classical Arabic, you know, that's, if you can understand it, then you might be able to say, oh, we can follow directly Quran and Hadith. But normally you need someone to go through. The madhabs become that means. So Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah ta'ala, there are two opinions of the scholars. He said, one opinion is, since the madhabs have been tadween, codified, every Muslim must follow one of these madhabs. And he said the other opinion is, no. The Muslim is not, it's not wajib, it's not obligatory upon him to follow one madhab. When he doesn't know, he should just ask an alim. He said perhaps the reason why those scholars who said it as obligatory, the reason why they made it obligatory is that they feared. If you say to the layperson, look, you don't have to follow madhab. When you don't know, you just have to ask a scholar. Because Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Imam Nawawi says, perhaps the reason that they didn't like this opinion is because they worried, if you leave this choice to the army, he will start following rukhsas, concessions. He will start window shopping, madhab shopping, until he finds the one that is really just easy on his nafs. Even if it's not even a valid opinion, he will take it. Imam Nawawi says, perhaps that's the reason. And he's right, that is actually the reason. However, historically, as an ilmi thing, our ulama, the majority of them say, the majority said and have said, every layperson must follow, at least in the basics of their Islam, a madhab, so that they don't become misguided or invent their own rules or make their own fatwas or take fatwas from those ignoramuses who are not qualified muftis, but they speak a lot. The other view of Imam Nawawi and Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they said, no, you don't have to follow a madhab. You just ask an alim when you don't know. But those people said, nevertheless, it is better to follow a madhab, because that will save you from following your own nafs and save you from the shaitan whispering to your ears, start picking and choosing from the ulama. So they said, in theory you don't have to, in practice you better do. And you will see that those scholars who become really great in fiqh, all of them, without exception, came through a madhab way. Even the ones that the Salafi sheikhs love, like Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayh, his basis, he is Hanbali. But some scholars, like Imam Ibn Kathir, the famous author of Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Imam Ibn Kathir said, in the last 5 years of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's life, he became an independent jurist. He became what they call mujtahid mutlaq, like the four imams, that they don't need to follow anything, they don't need to follow anyone through accessing the Quran and Sunnah. Now they've got so much ilm, they can do it directly. But Ibn Taymiyyah, at the age of 20, he was giving fatwas. He dies at 65. Ibn Kathir says from the age of 60 to 65 he can do this. At the age of 20 he's giving fatwas. He's already memorized Bukhari, Muslim, Musnad of Ahmad, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud by the age of 20. And yet he wasn't qualified to go directly until the last 5 years of his life, according to some scholars. Which shows you just can't do it just like that. So this idea So even Ibn Taymiyyah, if you take the former Mufti of Saudi Arabia, the former Grand Mufti, Sheikh Ibn Abbas, he's also always Hanbali. He learned from his sheikhs who were Hanbalis. Ibn Uthaymeen is even more on the madhab than he. They just have this view, they have this principle, which is a legitimate, valid principle. They say whenever a scholar of that level reaches that much knowledge whereby they can look at their madhab and say, well look, there is a stronger view there, then they should follow what they believe their stronger view is for themselves. But the lay people, what do they know stronger from not stronger? When Sheikh such and such says the hadith is sahih, you and I don't know that for sure, we just trust. When you're told as a young person or as however old you are that Bukhari is sahih, you just believe. You didn't go and check the chains and the men in the chains and then you just accept. Just like when someone says to you, the shurut, one of the conditions of prayer is that you have to have wudu, tahara. You just accept. You don't start going, when someone says that, look, if you're in you have to ascertain the qibla, the direction of qibla. You can't just pray whatever. You accept. Now maybe as a Shafi, or let me speak more clearly, maybe as a Hanbali, okay, the issue of nafil prayer, okay, is that it's preferred to face the qibla. But if you can't get your camel in that direction, and you can't even get your body in that because it's just going whatever way, then you have the intention, you wanted to face the qibla, and you pray a nafil prayer. As an allowance, nafil prayer, not sunnah prayer, not fard prayer. Why? You have to face the qibla. And if you intentionally don't face the qibla, not only is your prayer null and void, you're sinful. But how would you know that? Just from reading, you just trust. You just trust. You trust that in the Hanbali school, it's obligatory to say Bismillah before making wudu, as a must. If you forget, then it's excused. But in the other schools, it's not a must. Why? Because I trust that the Hanbali scholars believe the hadith about saying Bismillah is sahih. But most of the scholars say the hadith isn't sahih. Trust. If you don't trust, how? And today you will find even the Salafi brothers and sisters, our Salafi brothers, they follow a madhab. They follow the madhab of Sheikh Al-Albani, or Sheikh Ibn Abbas, or Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen. But they follow a madhab because it's impossible to get away from following an authority. We say, leaving alone the discussion about how scholarly they weren't, because I don't want to be bad-mouthing any ulama ala ra'si wal ayn. But what we know is, these three Salafi sheikhs, they were not calling to their madhab, to their way. And if they were, they were never justified in doing so. We believe, inshallah, they weren't. But how, and where was Bin Baz compared to Abu Hanifa or Imam Ahmad al-Malik? Where was Al-Albani? We don't know. You know, even the Salafis, I'm talking Salafi, they won't know. But how comes you've given their preference over the great Imams and all the scholars who followed in the footsteps of those Imams? One of the answers is, you see, today the modern scholars, they looked at all the hadiths. How do you know? Did you say, excuse me, Ya Sheikh Ibn Baz, Alhamdulillah, or when he was alive, did you read every single hadith in the world? Did you ask him this to know this for sure? I guarantee even if you asked him, he would have said no. Don't be silly. Did Sheikh Al-Albani read every single hadith? No. Did Ibn Uthaymeen? No. But you've just said that you just assumed they have. How? Just through following, blind following, a natural thing. So what's happened today is people who say that we don't need to follow a madhab. See, one of the things that really pushed me in this way is sometimes you can be very bigoted in following a madhab, ta'assur, hizbiyya. Rahmatul alayh to the one whose example I'm going to give, but I have to give this. So I was called into the office of this mosque that was telling me how I'm praying differently. And they were telling me that, look, I'm being misguided. And this is how they show it. They said, look, Malikis, they pray like this. The Shafis, they pray like this. The Hanbalis, they do this. And we Hanafis, we pray like this. I said, astaghfirullah, and I walked out the meeting. Because this man, who I had a good relationship with, and I'm sure he didn't intend it, but his bigotry is coming out. What? Malikis pray like that? Literally, wallah, like this. Well, you couldn't say the Malikis leave their hands on their side, and the Shafis fold their hands above their navel. But no, you have to do this. And we Hanafi. So when me and the generation of brothers with me found that, they're just Hanafi. You see, why we don't do this is because Abu Hanifa had the hadith. What? So Imam Malik didn't have the hadith. Oh yeah. They're all brothers and they're all right, but Abu Hanifa's more right. How do you know? So when we found that bigotry, one extremism, you respond with another extremism. It's just unfortunately the natural way. It's wrong. You don't fight extremism with extremism. You don't fight bid'ah with a bid'ah. You don't fight sin with sin. But it's a natural thing that happens for most human beings. So we poof. And every time shaitan is there as well, and every time someone is there to invite me towards following madhab, I'm thinking, they just want me to be Hanafi. So that is part of our problem as well. And we still have this problem today. We have some people who, they look at some of the Salafi young men and women, and really there is so much goodness waiting to be tapped in the hearts of many of those young people. Some of those young people, wallah alim, only Allah can help. Many of those young people, and I was one of them, can easily be helped with some decent ilm, some decent sincerity, some decent kindness, and some decent, give me something I can relate to. Don't tell me some strange Indian name, and I'm already following Arabic, kind of Arab side scholars. Try to win my heart over. So many of those hearts can be won over, but they will be never won over if it's like, they can see from us, I just want to make them Hanafi. Or, no, you know what? If they stop following whatever they want to follow, and came to Orthodox Islam, anyone, Shafi, Hanbali, Malik, Alhamdulillah. But no, they have to be Hanafi. Once this nonsense stops by some of the people up and down this country, which we still see today, not as bad as in the past, but we still see, and there's a sincerity that I don't want you to follow my group, or my way, or my madhab, or my school, or my sheikh, I just want you to be one of the followers of legitimate scholarship. Scholarship which is sound, authoritative. It has an isnad, a chain going back all the way to the true ulama. Then, alhamdulillah, however you pray, you can pray. It really doesn't matter. Everybody, including Salafis, will end up following an authority. When Sheikh Al-Albani for the Salafi says the hadith is sahih, hadith is sahih. You don't say, well, hold on, let me just follow the evidences of Sheikh Al-Albani. Maybe one or two students of knowledge, will do that on one or two hadith, but by and large, the Salafis will just as naturally follow without proofs their scholars as the rest of the Muslims will do with their scholars. The only difference is, there is an agreement, mujma'ala, that Abu Hanifa and his school, Malik and his school, Shafi and his school, Ahmed and his school, are legitimate expressions of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. There is no mujma'ala, there is no agreement that Sheikh al-Abbas, Sheikh al-Uthaymeen, Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahumullah, were from the rightly guided scholars. I believe they were, but 1,000 other scholars today will tell you they were misguided. There is mukhtalif fihi about them. You should follow that which has been agreed upon to be correct, not something which may or may not. Why? Because this is not like buying an iPhone 6. I heard it, iPhone 6 Plus. I heard it bends in the middle, but I heard it's not so bad. So since I'm a millionaire, £600 for a phone is not a big deal. So I'll buy another phone for 6, and then 2 days later, astaghfirullah, it bends in the middle. Khalas, you just lost 650 quid. But you're a millionaire anyway, right? So it doesn't matter. This is about Jannah, Jahannam. This is about Allah's rida, pleasure, Allah's anger, ghadab. This is big issues that we can only get right the first time. One final thing. Even though those scholars, I believe, didn't intend it, but once you open the door to say, look, if you reach this qualified level, you can weigh up the evidences. But they don't tell you what qualified level. They don't tell you what qualified level. So everybody who starts reading and learning Arabic and they've got a few books on their shelves and these books, they all start doing it. And then you get people who will do it in prayer, for example, in Masail of prayer and Masail of fasting. Then you get people who do it in Masail of siyasa and politics and jihad, which has a bigger problem if you get it wrong. I get it wrong in prayer, my prayer is null and void on the day of judgment, that's just me. I start doing that in social political issues of Islam, it's going to affect 10 more people, 100 more people, 1,000 more people. The do-it-yourself, DIY Islam that you find now with all of this ISIS, stroke Boko Haram, stroke elements of Al-Qaeda with their different fiqh afkar, all of that stem, they're not Tablighi Jamaat, right? They're not graduates of Azhar. They're not from Zaytuna of the Great Institute. They are not, they are not from Deoband, okay? They have a Salafi background. And I came from that, I understand that. And what it is once you say you can weigh up, and once I convince you enough, yeah, the old Imams are good, but we need to revise what they do, because after all, they were human and they can make mistakes. Can't they make mistakes? Can't they? And then you say yes. They say, well, how do you know that's not one of their mistakes? But I've got the hadith here. And you think, oh, maybe that's the hadith. And once you're down that road, slowly and steadily, shaitan will force it more, and then you become more disconnected from the classical ulama, until now, actually, you distrust in your heart nearly every alim, until the Salafi ulama tell you that alim is okay. So even Imam Nawawi is not to be trusted. Even Imam Al-Ghazali is not to be trusted. Even this Imam, that is not to be trusted. And what do the Indian Pakistani ulama know? They're not even Arabs. They're not even Arabs. And then these are the 3 or 4 ulama. And with these 3 or 4, now you're wearing the special ulama glasses. Now you can only see through these blinkers. And you judge everybody. So if these glasses were red, everything looks red, even this paper looks red. And you say, no, Abu Aaliyah's paper is white. Wallahi, the paper is red, you blind? Why? I'm not being insincere. It's just that I didn't know that my glasses, the way I see things, has been tinted with a colour. And shaitan is there to help my misguidance more and more, even if I didn't intend it. So we're at a stage whereby even if you can say that there is some good, some khair that comes from weighing up the proofs with qualified people, 2 things that I can say, wallahi, as a guarantee to being in it. A lot of people who think they can weigh up, wallahi, they have no qualification in fiqh. And 2, to weigh up adillah, proofs. You know what? I believe that Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah could do that in the Hanbali school, but you know what? The Sheikh died at the age of 80. And he probably was only doing this in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. And he just spent his life just on that fiqh. You can imagine that when you've just studied only that, you don't know TV, you don't know this, you don't know anything other than ibadah, knowledge, deen, zakah, whatever. Then inshallah. But what type of people have minds like that? Very few people. And even if you look at the great masters of Azhar of the past, it's very hard to find great imams like that. If you look at Darul Uloom Deoband, the institute in India, Pakistan, you can think of some of their major scholars who are great fuqaha. It's very difficult to find people like that. I'm not saying that no one's around like that. You might find 1 or 2, but 100 years ago, 80 years ago, you might find 7 or 8, 10 or 12, 15 or more. Why? Because the nature of the age is that great men and women don't become rarer and rarer. So, even if you follow the opinion I do, which is I don't believe that the layperson must follow one madhab to the exclusion of everything else. I follow the other opinion. Practically, I have seen in my life, it never, ever, ever works when you just say, oh, just ask someone. Because shaitan will be there, and you have not spiritually grown, you have not overcome your nafs or your ego. I can barely control my temper with my parents. I can barely lower my gaze. That's how weak my iman and ego is. That somehow with a religious text, I will be sincere and weigh out the strongest. And the other thing is, you know what? I didn't get one GCE. No, don't do GCEs. What do? What do we do today? A-levels and O-levels. I didn't get one O-level, let's just say. Meaning I could be a very pious man, but I got no intellectual ability. You need intellectual ability to weigh up proofs. SubhanAllah, I have seen some of the brothers with some of the best akhlaq I've ever seen. Akhlaq zahir. But some of the worst aql that I've ever seen trying to weigh up proofs. It's a horror. And we live in a world with religious anarchy where everybody who's not qualified is weighing up proofs. Everybody. And it makes you wonder as a final thing. So therefore, sorry, let me just go back to that. Therefore, practically, at least in your salat, tahara, zakat, saum, hajj, follow a madhab. Follow the madhab that you are either brought up on, because then it just requires 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 weeks to refresh your memory on certain things, because you already got some basic remembrance there. Or let's just say you're a convert and you're starting fresh. Follow a madhab whose books and teachers are easily available. No good saying, oh, I live in Leytonstone and I'm going to follow Maliki madhab. Show me a Maliki scholar in Leytonstone. Not a Maliki follower, a Maliki alim. No good saying I will be Hanbali, even though that is my school, okay? And where, subhanAllah, you can find more dinosaurs than you can find Hanbalis. Practically in Leytonstone or in London or in the UK, it's either Hanafi or Shafi. Not because they're the two best, but because of whatever Allah's wisdom, they have the greatest amount of scholars, books, and material to teach people from the basics right up to the highest levels. Otherwise, let's say you're someone who doesn't know Arabic, but he wants to be Maliki. How is he going to learn the Maliki? He won't even know the fara'id of wudu. Alright, Maliki way. Because he neither speaks Arabic, neither can he access a Maliki alim. So, practically, and the reason why I say Salah, Zakah, Hajj, the basic pillars, is because many of the things in the mu'amalat, the buying and selling and the laws of inheritance, some of them have changed because of time and place. So when you get to that situation, you may ask from your school, alhamdulillah, but because it might be a one-off thing that you might have to ask, just ask any qualified scholar. But at least for your daily things that you're going to use regularly, stick to one way. Therefore, you won't get into a yo-yo issue. See, the Hanafis, they only raise their hand once in the prayer. And that's it. And in ruku, and they don't do it. And the Shafis, they raise their hand going down into ruku and sajda, and coming and going down to sajda. Someone, don't bob up and down like a yo-yo. Know that both ways are legitimate ways of praying. Maybe on the Day of Judgment, Allah will say, this prayer gets 2 rewards for this action and this prayer gets 1 reward. Or maybe Allah will say, well, in the end, the Ummah was faced with the hadith of Ibn Umar, mathalan, and the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Umar's hadith says the Prophet prayed this way with extra raisings of the hands. And the Shafis and the Hanbalis followed this. And Ibn Mas'ud said, I will show you the prayer of the Prophet. And he prayed and he only raised his hand once. And the Hanafis took this. Just work out what way you're going to pray. When someone comes to you, say, oh yeah, but there's a hadith, say, Barakallahu feekum, I know there's hadith, there are many hadiths, but I have prayed with this authority. Then you and I spend the rest of our lives on trying to make the inward prayer with khushu', with humility, with hudur al-qalb, with presence of heart, which is really the essence of the prayer. Not today I glorify him, and then someone tells me, then I change my mind, then someone tells me, then I'm bobbing up and down the road, and every time I meet an alim, what question do I ask? I don't ask him, Ya Shaykh, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better son? How can I have hudur al-qalb? How can I make more dhikr? Ya Shaykh, do I glorify them in prayer or not? Ya Shaykh, do I do it? And every time Shaykh comes, you ask him the same question. Don't get into this stupidity. This is a legitimate way of praying. Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. Be practical about it. Once a year, revise your teaching. Spend the rest of your time internalizing. Spend the rest of your time making khidmah for the poor and the needy. Spend the rest of your time reading hadith from Riyadh al-Salihin about character, adab, akhlaq, sincerity, khawf, fear of Allah, tawakkul of Allah, and those kind of things, mahabba of Allah. Because why? I don't need to go back to my fiqh. I learned it. These are the ways I make wudu. These are the way I pray. This is the way I fast. Using an inhaler breaks my fast. Using an inhaler doesn't break my fast. When I come to Jummah, as a Hanbali, I am obligated to pray 2 rakat at the masjid, whether the imam is giving a khutbah or not, and everybody else, they are obligated to sit down. And I don't have to debate, argue, I just have to follow what I believe to be authoritative. Even Salafis do that, but they do that only with 3 imams who they don't know what level they're at. But they open the gates of picking and choosing and weighing up in ways that haven't helped. ISIS is one of the nata'ij or the natija of this. Al-Qaeda is one of the natijas of this. Once you open the door, this type of deviation will spread, and shaitan will make it pleasing. So please, from someone who's been there, done that, and seen the consequences, and been at the helm, I'm not telling you to come to my way or my way of, I'm just saying there is an orthodoxy. An orthodoxy. Imam ibn Qudam, one of the great Hanbalis, in his time he was the Salafi Imam. He said in his Aqidah book that the way of fiqh is only found in the 4 madhabs today. And that has been the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah since over 1,000 years. Okay? And if you want to pay respect to Shiekh Al-Albani, Ibn Abbas, pay respect to the ulama before them even greater. Because the ulama before them were at a level that those imams don't even reach their feet. And if you think that, no, these are the ulama, you'll probably find in your heart, you move from bigoted following of West Ham, Chelsea or Man U to bigoted ta'assub, hizbiyah of modern sheikhs. That's all you've done. Okay? And Allah will take us to task for splitting the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So please, and if you don't know who these sheikhs that I mentioned are, then think well of them. If you have an opinion from qualified scholars, then you take the responsibility of your opinion. Okay? But this thing on Quran and Hadith or madhabs, it's a false question. Because the Quran and the madhabs derive from the Quran and the Sunnah, directly and indirectly. If there isn't a clear text in the Quran or the Hadith, then the scholar will have to use, in light of Quran and Hadith, his scholarly ijtihad and judgment. He must be qualified for this. Qualification. He must know all of the ayatul ahkam of the Quran. Not all of the Quran necessarily, but all of the ayatul ahkam, which is about just over 600, and he needs to know them really well. He needs to know all of the hadith, ahkam hadith, which are a few thousand. He needs to know what parts of the Quran are mansukh and nasikh, have been abrogated and abrogating. He needs to know the am and khas. When the Prophet says something, does he mean this in a general way, am, or does he mean this in a khas way, specific? When he says something, does he mean it metaphorically or literally? He needs to know the language, the nahu, the sarf, the balagh. Then he needs to have the ability to be a jurist, the intellectual ability. Which is why Imam Muslim, generally, bil-jumla, Imam Muslim, he is a master of hadith. Imam An-Nasa'i and Ibn Majah are masters of hadith. But they are not jurists. They are not jurists. But you know what? Between them, between those 3, they know more than 2 million hadiths. There isn't a scholar of hadith like them alive today. But we don't take fiqh from them because as astounding as they are not the fuqaha of Islam. They are not like Al-Bukhari, for example, or Imam Ahmed, for example, or Imam Malik, for example. Okay? Who are known to be hadith, but with fiqh. And they don't have minds, juristic minds like Shafi or Abu Hanifa. It's just something else. And Allah gives his fadl where he wants. Right? So please, and I'm sure most of you are clear on this, it would be nice if some of the youths could be accessed and some of those brothers who have an issue, because many of their questions could be really easily answered if the heart is prepared to listen and discuss. It really is an important issue. If I went on a bit, maybe got a bit complex, then you'll understand why. We'll open it for any questions, inshallah. And my intention wasn't to bash one people and uphold another. My intention was just trying to show you where Sunni orthodoxy has agreed and the parts that they have differed and the practicality that we need today. Really. Just need to know how to do wudu and pray, and then just spend the rest of my life trying to make even one sajda with hudur al-qalb, with presence of heart, with khushu'. Khushu' is more obligatory in the prayer than doing Rafa'adain. Rafa'adain is at the most, after the first Allahu Akbar and raising hands, the next, according to the Shafis and the Hanbalis, it's sunnah. If you do it, you get more reward. If you don't do it, no. But not to have khushu' in the prayer. Khushu' is the ruh, is the spirit of the prayer. It's the greatest fight in the prayer. And I spend no time trying to learn khushu'. I don't ask any of the ulama about how to get khushu'. I don't ask Allah. But I'm just saying, my hands, and today I'm doing this, today I'm arguing with another person, then I'm on the internet doing this. Why? It's just shaitan. And yet I don't even know how to be a better son to my parents. What? You think our Prophet would love for argument from people who have no knowledge of Arabic even, let alone of the ulum of the deen, and the things that I can do, and I should be doing, and I don't do it because I'm arguing and I'm debating, and you think our Prophet would like this for ourselves? No, absolutely. So beware of religious anarchy. This is the age of religious anarchy. It's where the nafs of our nafs tells us, you know what, you're educated, you can read, you don't blindly follow, you can work out your own Islam. Well, there you have it, own Islam. And this is one example of 1,000. One brother praying nearly 5 years, 4.5 years. He's praying, he's journeying from here to, let's say, Birmingham, so I'm making up the names of the cities, so in case someone might know who he is and they won't know now. He's journeying from London to, say, Birmingham nearly every day for job. And he knows, oh, I'm a traveller. He not only prays the traveller prayer, he prays sitting down in the car. Like when he's driving or when he's in the passenger seat. So we're having a nice little walima, someone's walima, we're sitting down, discussion comes up, and they're over there, and the brother says, he must have told the brother that I pray sitting down in my prayer. And the brother, you hear him, Ajib! That's strange! That everybody sitting down for dinner, looking that way. And they started having a brotherly argument. He said, you can't do that. Yes, I can. You can't do that. Yes, I can. Oh, and then the brother goes, and I'm listening to this, and I'm not quite sure what it is going on. But then all I hear him say, hadith is in Bukhari. Prophet prayed, and he was riding on a camel. Riding on the camel. There's more than one hadith in Bukhari there. He's riding on a camel. So, of course, camel or car, there's no difference. So I'm praying, and I'm riding in the car. The brother, he says, Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah. And at that point, I thought, I couldn't help it. And actually, quite a few mashayikh were there as well. And all of us like, hold on. First of all, one of the elders told off this brother for agreeing. How can you agree with the brother when the brother is jahil? At least you say, okay brother, let me ask an alim. Not, oh, thank you gave me a hadith. Secondly, the hadith is agreed on its sihah and its authenticity, but scholars differ on when can you pray whilst riding or sitting down. They all agree You cannot pray your fard prayer. You cannot pray your fard prayer sitting down unless you're unable to stand. In this case, driving a car, you can pull over at the service station, not on the hard shoulder, that's illegal, right? On the service station, and you can find a place to pray standing, no excuse. Post 9/11 on a plane, post 9/11 on a plane, and you're not on Saudi Airways or Pakistani Airways or Qatari Airways, you have to sit down and pray. Especially got a beard, you start moving, you start going this way and that way, you're going to find the air marshal, right? He's going to be your best friend very soon, right? And you're not going to be wearing bracelets, you're going to be wearing handcuffs, right? So they were forced to, okay? But on those planes where that has provisions to stand and pray, you must stand and pray, unless you can't stand and pray. Ill, disabled. Everyone agrees on that. There is no difference of opinion. No alim has ever given us a fatwa contrary. Then it differs. What happens to sunnah prayers and nafil prayers? And they differ about that. That's a different thing. So, we told him. The brother goes, this other brother got told off for just accepting the verdict of a non-scholar. So his action was worse than his, in one sense. Then I said to the brother, you know, the prayer isn't acceptable like that. He goes, but I didn't know, I just read the hadith. I said, yeah, but you had scholars around you. At any point in time, you could have just asked someone qualified. If you read the hadith, that I have been ordered to fight people until they say La ilaha illallah. Does that mean now that I come out of my house in Leytonstone, Camel Road, and say La ilaha illallah, he says no, then I fight him and kill him? And then say, oh, brother, I didn't know, I just read the hadith. How many more can you do? And you read one part of the Quran where it says, don't approach the prayer when you're drunk. Okay, well, I'm at home, so I can drink now. And then next time I say, and then you say, oh, I said, but there's a verse that says that cancels that, says you can't drink any time now. Oh, I didn't know that. We will not be excused for this level of ignorance when the ulama are around. If we lived in some Amazon jungle and there is no alim and we just had one hadith book, inshallah Allah will reward us. Right? Because at least we were trying to follow. But when you have the ulama around you, if you lived in Cornwall somewhere where there's really, they've yet to see a brown person, let alone a Muslim, maybe. But here, no. So nearly every alim told him he has to repeat his prayers. And I put my head down because I agreed. And I knew this brother was going to ask me. And he said, but there's 4.5 years Abu Aaliyah. At least 3 of my prayers a day were like this. 2 or 3 of my prayers. I said, look, you know, prayer is something we owe God. If I owed you £1,000 and I gave you 1,000, but then later on you realise I gave you monopoly money, not the real money, I still owe you £1,000. Because monopoly money is unacceptable. Counterfeit money, counterfeit prayers, which don't fulfill the Sharia, are acceptable. But you were ready to mess around with your deen because you thought you didn't have to ask, even though you could have just asked anybody. And anyway, in your life, did you ever see anyone praying the Fard prayer sitting down from the ulama when they weren't ill? At least that should have been buzzing in your head, alarm bells. But no, every inward motive, what I'm trying to say is don't let any Muslim mess around with your orthodoxy and your fiqh. Oh, subhanallah. I say this because I still think I have so much tawbah to make from 1986 to 1991. Honestly, if you knew how much it hangs over my head, right? Who knows? Bismillah, my brother.
During the beginning of the